It was a typical Tuesday morning at JFK International Airport, bustling with the usual chaos of travelers rushing to catch their flights. The air buzzed with the hum of rolling suitcases, hurried footsteps, and announcements echoing through the terminals. Among the crowd stood Amara Thompson, a 16-year-old girl with a warm smile and a quiet confidence that made her stand out even in the sea of people. She was on her way to London to spend spring break with her grandmother, something she had been looking forward to for weeks. Amara wasn't like most teenagers traveling alone. For one, she was used to flying. She'd been doing it since she was a child. Her mother, Dr. Evelyn Thompson, was not just any parent. She was the founder and CEO of Skylink Airlines, one of the fastest-growing airlines in the world. But despite her family's prominence, Amara didn't want to draw attention to herself. She preferred blending in, sitting quietly in her seat, reading a book or listening to music during the flight. To her, flying was just another part of life, nothing extraordinary. That day, Amara arrived at Gate 27 with plenty of time to spare. She wore a pair of jeans, sneakers, and a light jacket, carrying a small backpack slung over her shoulder. Her ticket was neatly folded inside her pocket, printed directly from the airline's website earlier that morning. Everything seemed normal as she approached the gate agent ready to board her flight. The flight attendant stationed at the desk was a middle-aged woman named Janet. She had worked for Skylink for over a decade and prided herself on being efficient, though some passengers might have described her demeanor as cold or distant. When Amara stepped up to hand over her ticket, Janet barely glanced at her before taking the piece of paper. At first, everything appeared routine. Janet scanned the ticket, nodded, and then paused. Something about Amara caught Janet's attention, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Maybe it was the way Amara carried herself, or perhaps it was her youthful appearance. Whatever it was, Janet felt an inexplicable irritation rise within her. Instead of double-checking the ticket or asking Amara any questions, Janet suddenly tore the paper in half right in front of her. Amara froze, staring at the shredded remains of her ticket in disbelief. What are you doing?" she stammered, her voice trembling slightly. "This isn't valid," Janet replied curtly, tossing the torn pieces onto the counter. Her tone was dismissive, almost bored, as if she were dealing with a minor inconvenience rather than a paying customer. "But I printed it from your website," Amara protested, trying to keep her composure. "It has my confirmation number. Can you please check again?" Janet didn't bother responding. She simply shook her head and turned her attention to the next passenger in line, effectively ignoring Amara as if she weren't even there. For a moment, Amara stood rooted to the spot, unsure of what to do. Passengers waiting behind her began to murmur, some casting sympathetic glances her way, while others avoided making eye contact altogether. A few whispered among themselves, clearly uncomfortable witnessing the scene unfold. One man leaned forward and said softly, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Amara managed a weak smile but shook her head. "I'll figure it out," she muttered, stepping aside to avoid holding up the line. As she moved away from the gate, her mind raced. What had just happened? Why had Janet treated her so rudely without even verifying her ticket? And why did she feel like this wasn't just about the ticket itself? Finding a quiet corner near the boarding area, Amara pulled out her phone and opened the email containing her e-ticket. Sure enough, all the details were correct. Her name, flight number, departure time. It was exactly as it should be. Frustrated and embarrassed, she decided to call her mother. While she usually tried to handle things on her own, this situation felt different. Something about Janet's behavior had left a sour taste in her mouth, and she needed advice. When Evelyn answered the call, her voice was calm and reassuring, as always. "Hey, sweetheart, how's everything going?" she asked. Amara hesitated, unsure of how to explain what had happened. Finally, she took a deep breath and recounted the entire incident, from handing over her ticket to being ignored by Janet. By the time she finished, her voice wavered with emotion. "Mom, I don't understand why she acted like that. It's like she didn't even care." On the other end of the line, Evelyn listened intently, She knew airports could be stressful places and mistakes sometimes occurred. But there was something about Amara's description of the interaction that troubled her deeply. Evelyn had faced prejudice throughout her career, both as a black woman and as someone who dared to challenge the status quo by building her own airline. Hearing her daughter recount a similar experience hit close to home. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Evelyn said firmly. "First, go back to the gate and ask to speak with a supervisor. Show them your confirmation email, and explain what happened. If they give you any trouble, let me know immediately." Amara nodded, feeling a little better now that she had a plan. Still, as she hung up the phone, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in the pit of her stomach. This wasn't just about a torn ticket anymore. It was about being treated unfairly because of who she was. And for the first time, she wondered whether keeping her identity hidden was really worth it, if it meant enduring moments like these in silence. As Amara made her way back to the gate, she noticed Janet watching her closely. There was no apology in the flight attendant's eyes, only a flicker of annoyance as if Amara's presence was an inconvenience. Determined not to let the situation escalate further, Amara approached the supervisor instead, clutching her phone tightly in her hand. Little did anyone realize that this seemingly ordinary day would soon spiral into something far more significant than anyone could have anticipated. The days following the incident at Gate 27 were filled with tension and anticipation. News of what had happened spread like wildfire through Skylink Airlines, from the bustling terminals to the quiet corners of corporate offices. Employees whispered about Amara's story, speculating about who she was and why Evelyn Thompson, Skylink's formidable CEO, had taken such a personal interest in the matter. For Janet, the flight attendant at the center of the controversy, life became increasingly uncomfortable. Every glance from her coworkers felt like judgment, every conversation laced with unspoken accusations. Janet tried to brush it off, telling herself that incidents like this happened all the time in high-pressure environments like airports. Mistakes were made, tempers flared, and people moved on. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was brewing. She knew enough about Evelyn Thompson to understand that crossing her wasn't something anyone walked away from unscathed. Still, Janet clung to the hope that the whole thing would blow over quickly, a minor blip in an otherwise ordinary career. What Janet didn't know was that Evelyn had already set her plan into motion. Within hours of learning about the incident, Evelyn had called an emergency meeting with her executive team. The room buzzed with nervous energy as senior leaders filed in, each one aware that this wasn't going to be a routine discussion. When Evelyn entered, her presence commanded immediate silence. Dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, her expression was calm but resolute. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Evelyn began, her voice steady and authoritative. "I'm sure most of you have heard about what happened at Gate on yesterday. My daughter, Amara, was treated unfairly by one of our own employees, an employee who works under our name, representing our values." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Evelyn paused, letting them sink in before continuing. "This isn't just about my family. It's about the integrity of this company. If we claim to stand for inclusivity, respect, and equality, then those aren't just words on a poster. They're promises we make to every single person who steps onto one of our planes. And when someone breaks that promise, we need to act decisively." Evelyn turned to face the screen behind her, where security footage of the incident played silently. The grainy video showed Janet tearing up Amara's ticket without hesitation, followed by Amara's stunned reaction. Evelyn pointed to the screen. "This is unacceptable. This is not how we treat our passengers. Not ever." The executives exchanged uneasy glances, knowing full well that Evelyn wasn't bluffing. One of them cleared their throat nervously and asked, "What do you propose we do?" Evelyn's response was swift and unwavering. "First, I want a full investigation into this incident. Second, I want mandatory diversity training implemented across the board, not just for frontline staff, but for everyone in this company. Third, we're going to establish a hotline where passengers and employees can report discriminatory behavior anonymously. And finally, I want accountability. Whoever is responsible for this must face consequences. By the end of the meeting, the message was clear. Evelyn meant business. Orders were dispatched immediately, and within 24 hours, Janet found herself summoned to a disciplinary hearing. Her supervisor informed her that she would be placed on administrative leave pending further review. Janet protested, insisting she had simply followed protocol, but her arguments fell on deaf ears. The wheels of justice, or perhaps retribution, were already turning. Meanwhile, Amara was navigating her own emotional journey. Though relieved that her mother was taking action, she couldn't help but feel conflicted. On one hand, she appreciated having someone powerful in her corner, someone who could demand answers and enforce change. On the other hand, she hated the idea that her identity, the fact that her mother owned the airline, was being used as leverage. What if she hadn't been Evelyn Thompson's daughter? Would anyone have cared? These thoughts gnawed at her as she boarded her flight to London. Sitting by the window, she stared out at the tarmac, watching ground crew members scurry around preparing for takeoff. Normally, this was her favorite part of flying, the moment when the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, leaving the world below behind. But today her mind was too preoccupied to enjoy it. As the plane climbed higher, Amara pulled out her journal and began writing. At first it was just fragments of thoughts, how Janet had looked at her, how small she had felt standing there with her torn ticket. But soon, words poured onto the page in a steady stream. She wrote about the anger and humiliation she had felt, but also about the larger issues at play. The biases that lingered in industries like aviation, the assumptions people made based on appearances, and the systemic barriers that kept marginalized voices from being heard. When she finally put her pen down, Amara realized something important. This experience didn't have to define her. Instead, it could become a catalyst for growth, for herself and for others. Inspired by her mother's determination to create change, Amara decided to share her story publicly. Maybe, just maybe, speaking out could spark a broader conversation about fairness and accountability in travel. Back home, Evelyn was working tirelessly to ensure that the reforms she envisioned would stick. She collaborated with experts in diversity and inclusion to design comprehensive training programs for Skylink employees. These sessions weren't just about ticking boxes. They were designed to challenge deeply ingrained biases and foster genuine understanding among staff. Role-playing scenarios, open discussions, and real-life case studies were incorporated to make the training impactful and memorable. At the same time, Evelyn partnered with advocacy groups dedicated to promoting equity in transportation. Together, they launched a campaign aimed at raising awareness about discrimination in the aviation industry. Flyers, social media posts, and even airport announcements encouraged passengers to speak up if they encountered unfair treatment. The slogan was simple yet powerful: "Your voice matters." While these efforts earned praise from many quarters, they also drew criticism. Some accused Evelyn of overreacting, arguing that tearing up a ticket, even unjustly, didn't warrant such drastic measures. Others claimed she was using her position to settle personal scores. But Evelyn remained undeterred. To her, this wasn't about revenge or making headlines. It was about creating a culture where everyone felt valued and respected. Amara, too, faced pushback when she started sharing her story online. In an op-ed published in a major newspaper, she recounted the incident at Gate 27 and called for greater accountability in the aviation industry. The piece went viral almost instantly, sparking heated debates on social media. Some commenters supported her courage, while others dismissed her as privileged or attention-seeking. Despite the negativity, Amara refused to back down. She created a platform where travelers could share their own experiences of discrimination, amplifying voices that might otherwise have gone unheard. As the weeks passed, the ripple effects of Evelyn and Amara's actions became impossible to ignore. Passengers began reporting incidents more frequently, emboldened by the knowledge that Skylink took their concerns seriously. Employees attended training sessions with renewed focus, realizing that their behavior had real consequences, not just for individuals, but for the company's reputation as a whole. Slowly but surely, a shift began to take hold. For Janet, the fallout was both professional and personal. During her suspension, she was required to complete sensitivity training and write a formal apology letter to Amara. At first, Janet resented the assignment, viewing it as unnecessary punishment. But as she reflected on her actions and the impact they had on someone so young and vulnerable, she began to see things differently. Writing the letter forced her to confront her own biases and consider how easily assumptions could cloud judgment. When Janet returned to work months later, she did so quietly, keeping a low profile and focusing on doing her job with care and professionalism. Though some colleagues treated her coldly, others welcomed her back with cautious optimism. Over time, Janet worked hard to rebuild trust, determined to prove that she had learned from her mistakes. Through it all, Amara continued to grow into her role as an advocate for change. With her mother's guidance, she spoke at conferences, participated in panel discussions, and mentored other young people interested in activism. Watching her daughter evolve into a fearless changemaker filled Evelyn with immense pride. Together, they proved that even the most painful experiences could lead to meaningful transformation, if you were brave enough to confront them head-on. As the sun set over another busy day at JFK International Airport, passengers streamed through the gates, unaware of the quiet revolution happening behind the scenes. For Amara and Evelyn, the journey was far from over. But they knew one thing for certain: no obstacle was too great to overcome when love, resilience, and purpose fueled the fight. The months following the incident at Gate 27 had transformed not only Amara and Evelyn's lives, but also the culture of Skylink Airlines as a whole. What began as a deeply personal moment of discrimination had blossomed into a movement, one that challenged systemic biases, inspired change, and reminded everyone involved of the power of resilience and forgiveness. Amara, now 17, had grown into her role as an advocate in ways she never imagined. Her platform, Sky Voices Gymnasium, had become a beacon of hope for travelers around the world. The stories shared on the platform painted vivid pictures of both pain and triumph, passengers recounting moments of unfair treatment, alongside tales of unexpected kindness from airline staff. These narratives served as reminders that while progress was slow, it was possible. People were listening, and more importantly, they were acting. One particularly impactful initiative Amara spearheaded was a collaboration with schools to educate students about bias and inclusion. She believed that shaping young minds early could prevent future generations from repeating the same mistakes. Through workshops, interactive games, and storytelling sessions, Amara taught kids how to recognize prejudice, not just in others, but within themselves. "It's okay to make mistakes," she often told them during these sessions. "But when we know better, we have to do better." Her efforts earned her recognition far beyond what she ever anticipated. Local newspapers hailed her as a voice of the future, while national magazines featured her in spreads celebrating young changemakers. Despite the accolades, Amara remained grounded. For her, this wasn't about fame or praise. It was about creating a world where no one had to feel small or dismissed because of who they were. Evelyn, too, continued to lead by example, ensuring that Skylink stayed at the forefront of the push for inclusivity. The reforms she implemented weren't just cosmetic changes. They were woven into the fabric of the company's operations. Every new hire underwent rigorous diversity training before stepping onto the job. Supervisors were empowered to address grievances swiftly and fairly, fostering a culture of accountability. And perhaps most importantly, employees were encouraged to speak openly about their experiences without fear of retaliation. These shifts didn't happen overnight, nor did they come without challenges. There were still skeptics within the organization, those who viewed the initiatives as unnecessary distractions from the bottom line. But Evelyn refused to compromise. She held town hall meetings where employees could voice their concerns directly to her, emphasizing that Skylink's success depended not just on profits, but on its reputation as a company that cared for its people. To further demonstrate her commitment, Evelyn launched an annual award program called Wings of Change. The awards recognized individuals, both employees and passengers, who went above and beyond to promote fairness and kindness. Recipients ranged from flight attendants who intervened in tense situations to passengers who stood up for fellow travelers facing discrimination. Each story highlighted the ripple effect of compassion, proving that even small acts could create lasting impact. As for Janet, her journey toward redemption was neither quick nor easy. Returning to work after her suspension felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Some coworkers treated her warmly, offering words of encouragement and support. Others kept their distance, unsure of how to reconcile her past actions with the person standing before them. Janet understood their hesitation and accepted it as part of her penance. What truly helped Janet heal was the feedback she received during diversity training sessions. Hearing firsthand accounts from colleagues about their own struggles with bias opened her eyes to the broader implications of her behavior. She realized that tearing up Amara's ticket wasn't just an isolated mistake. It was a symptom of a deeper issue rooted in societal prejudices. Acknowledging this truth was painful, but necessary for growth. Janet's turning point came during a team-building exercise designed to foster empathy among employees. Participants were paired up and asked to share personal stories of times when they felt judged unfairly. When it was Janet's turn to speak, she hesitated at first, unsure of whether anyone would care to listen. But as she recounted her childhood experiences of being bullied for her accent and economic background, tears welled up in her eyes, and so did understanding from her teammates. Afterward, several colleagues approached her privately to thank her for sharing. One coworker even hugged her, saying, "We all carry scars. It takes courage to show them." That moment marked the beginning of Janet's transformation. Slowly but surely, she rebuilt trust, not through grand gestures, but through consistent effort. She made a conscious decision to greet each passenger with warmth and respect, regardless of their appearance or demeanor. Over time, her sincerity shone through, earning her renewed respect from peers and passengers alike. By the end of the year, Skylink had become synonymous with inclusivity and innovation. Passengers praised the airline not just for its punctuality or comfort, but for the genuine care exhibited by its staff. Social media buzzed with positive reviews tagged Skylink Cares, showcasing everything from heartfelt interactions between crew members and families to thoughtful accommodations for travelers with disabilities. The airline's reputation soared, attracting loyal customers and top talent eager to be part of such a forward-thinking organization. For Amara and Evelyn, the culmination of their hard work came during a special ceremony hosted by Skylink to celebrate the company's achievements over the past year. Held at JFK International Airport, the very place where Amara's journey began, the event brought together employees, industry leaders, and community advocates. As Evelyn took the stage to deliver her keynote speech, the room erupted in applause. Today we gather not just to celebrate our successes, but to honor the lessons we've learned along the way. Evelyn began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. This journey has taught us that true leadership isn't about wielding power. It's about empowering others. It's about recognizing that every decision we make, no matter how small, has the potential to shape someone's life. She paused, scanning the crowd until her gaze landed on Amara, seated proudly in the front row. My daughter once asked me if blending in was worth sacrificing dignity. Today I can answer that question with certainty. No, it is not. Because when we stand tall in our truth, we inspire others to do the same. Together, we create a world where everyone belongs. The audience rose to their feet, giving Evelyn and Amara a standing ovation. Tears streamed down Amara's face as she joined her mother on stage, holding hands as they accepted an award for outstanding leadership in diversity and inclusion. For both of them, it was a moment of validation, a reminder that their efforts had touched countless lives. Later that evening, as fireworks lit up the sky outside the terminal, Amara reflected on how far they had come. From the humiliation of having her ticket torn up to becoming a symbol of hope for marginalized communities, her journey had been anything but ordinary. Yet she knew the fight was far from over. Discrimination wouldn't disappear overnight, but every step forward mattered. As Evelyn wrapped an arm around her daughter, she whispered, "You've done something incredible, sweetheart. But remember, this is just the beginning." Amara smiled, feeling a surge of determination. "I'm ready," she replied softly. "Ready to continue advocating, ready to keep learning, and ready to soar above prejudice, together." Months had passed since the incident at Gate 27, and while life seemed to have returned to normal for many people at Skylink Airlines, the ripples of change were still spreading. The reforms Evelyn Thompson had implemented were beginning to take root, transforming not just policies but also attitudes within the company. For Amara, however, the journey was far from over. What started as a deeply personal experience had evolved into something much bigger, a mission to amplify marginalized voices and challenge systemic biases in the aviation industry. Amara's op-ed, which she had written shortly after her trip to London, continued to resonate with readers around the world. In clear and heartfelt language, she described how it felt to be dismissed and humiliated simply because of someone else's assumptions. She didn't shy away from sharing her vulnerability, acknowledging that the incident had shaken her confidence and made her question whether blending in was worth sacrificing her dignity. But she also emphasized hope, urging others to speak up when faced with injustice. The response to her article was overwhelming. Thousands of people reached out to share their own stories, some similar to hers, others vastly different but united by a common thread of discrimination. There were tales of passengers being denied boarding due to racial profiling, employees facing harassment for their accents or cultural practices, and families separated during travel because of misunderstandings rooted in bias. Each story added another layer to the complex web of inequality that existed in the aviation industry. Inspired by these accounts, Amara decided to create a platform where travelers could come together to share their experiences and advocate for change. She named it Sky Voices, a nod to both her mother's airline and the idea that every voice mattered. Using social media, blogs, and even live events, Sky Voices became a space where people could connect, find support, and learn how to navigate difficult situations. Amara worked tirelessly to ensure the platform remained inclusive, inviting contributors from diverse backgrounds to share their perspectives. Her efforts caught the attention of advocacy groups and media outlets alike. Soon, Amara found herself speaking at conferences, appearing on television shows, and participating in panel discussions about equity in transportation. At first, the spotlight intimidated her. After all, she was still just a teenager navigating high school exams and college applications. But as she listened to others recount their struggles and triumphs, she realized that her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. One particularly memorable event took place at a global summit on diversity and inclusion. Standing on stage alongside activists, academics, and industry leaders, Amara delivered a speech that left the audience spellbound. "Discrimination isn't just about individual acts of cruelty," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "It's about systems that allow those acts to go unchecked. It's about silence when we should be speaking up. And it's about forgetting that behind every ticket, every boarding pass, is a person with dreams, fears, and hopes." Her words struck a chord, earning applause that echoed through the auditorium. Backstage afterward, several attendees approached her to express their gratitude. One woman, a flight attendant from another airline, hugged her tightly and whispered, "Thank you for giving us permission to believe things can get better." That moment stayed with Amara long after the summit ended, reminding her why this work mattered so much. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued to push for meaningful change within Skylink. The mandatory diversity training sessions proved to be eye-opening for many employees, sparking conversations they might never have had otherwise. Role-playing exercises challenged participants to see situations from different perspectives, helping them recognize unconscious biases they hadn't even realized they held. Feedback forms filled out after each session revealed a mix of emotions. Some employees expressed gratitude for the opportunity to grow, while others admitted feeling uncomfortable, but acknowledged the importance of confronting difficult truths. Evelyn also introduced new protocols to prevent incidents like Janet's behavior from happening again. For instance, All tickets flagged as invalid now required double verification before any action could be taken against the passenger. Supervisors were given additional authority to intervene in disputes, ensuring that accountability extended beyond frontline staff. These changes weren't always easy to implement. Resistance came from unexpected corners, with some employees grumbling about political correctness or unnecessary bureaucracy. But Evelyn stood firm, reminding everyone that progress often required stepping outside comfort zones. Perhaps the most impactful initiative was the anonymous hotline Evelyn established for reporting discriminatory behavior. Initially, there was skepticism about whether anyone would actually use it. Would passengers and employees trust the system? Would reports lead to tangible outcomes? To everyone's surprise, the hotline received dozens of calls in its first month alone. Some complaints were minor misunderstandings, while others highlighted serious issues that demanded immediate attention. Each report was investigated thoroughly, with findings shared transparently, while protecting the identities of those involved. These efforts didn't go unnoticed. Skylink began receiving recognition for its commitment to inclusivity, earning awards and accolades from organizations dedicated to promoting equality. Passengers noticed the difference too, praising the airline for its improved customer service and willingness to listen. Social media posts tagged with "Ja Skylink Cares" flooded platforms, showcasing positive interactions between staff and travelers. While Evelyn knew there was still work to be done, she took pride in knowing that Skylink was setting an example for the rest of the industry. For Janet, reintegration into the workplace was a slow and humbling process. Upon returning from her suspension, she kept her head down, focusing on fulfilling her duties without drawing attention to herself. Her colleagues treated her with varying degrees of warmth. Some welcomed her back with open arms, while others maintained a polite distance. Janet understood their reservations and didn't blame them. She knew she had a lot to prove. But what truly changed Janet's perspective was her involvement in the diversity training program. During one session, participants were asked to reflect on moments when they had judged someone unfairly. As Janet sat quietly in the corner of the room, memories of Amara flashed through her mind. She remembered the dismissive way she had torn up the ticket, the flicker of irritation she had felt upon seeing Amara's youthful face. For the first time, she allowed herself to confront those feelings honestly, recognizing the harm they had caused. After the session, Janet approached the facilitator and asked if she could write a letter to Amara. It wasn't part of the official requirements, but she felt compelled to reach out. Pouring her heart onto paper, Janet apologized sincerely, not just for tearing up the ticket, but for failing to treat Amara with the respect she deserved. She admitted that her actions had been driven by unconscious biases and expressed gratitude for the chance to learn and grow. When Amara received the letter weeks later, she read it carefully, her emotions swirling. Part of her wanted to dismiss it outright, unsure if Janet's apology was genuine. But another part of her recognized the courage it must have taken to write such a vulnerable message. After much thought, Amara decided to forgive Janet, not because she owed her anything, but because she believed in the power of redemption. "We all make mistakes," she told her mother one evening. "What matters is whether we're willing to change." As the months turned into a year, the transformation within Skylink and beyond became undeniable. Amara's advocacy work inspired countless others to join the fight for fairness and equality. Evelyn's leadership set a new standard for corporate responsibility, proving that businesses could thrive while prioritizing humanity over profit. And Janet, though forever marked by her past actions, emerged stronger and more empathetic than before. Together, they demonstrated that no obstacle was insurmountable when approached with compassion and determination. For Amara and Evelyn, the journey was proof that even the smallest act of defiance could ignite a movement, one capable of lifting countless lives above prejudice and toward a brighter future. When Amara finally hung up the phone after speaking with her mother, she felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. On one hand, Evelyn's calm and composed advice had given her some reassurance. On the other hand, the sting of Janet's actions, and the way it made her feel small and dismissed, still lingered. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked back toward Gate 27, determined to resolve the situation. As she approached the gate area, she noticed that Janet was still stationed at the desk, now helping another passenger. This time, however, Amara didn't go straight to Janet. Instead, she scanned the area for someone who looked like they might be in charge. Her eyes landed on a man wearing a Skylink uniform with a badge that read Supervisor pinned neatly above his chest pocket. He was standing near the boarding line, observing the process with a clipboard in hand. Amara hesitated for a moment before approaching him. "Excuse me," she said politely, trying to sound as confident as possible despite the knot in her stomach. The supervisor turned to face her, his expression neutral but attentive. "Yes, miss? How can I assist you?" he asked, his tone professional yet kind. "My name is Amara Thompson," she began, holding up her phone to show the e-ticket confirmation email. "I was told my ticket wasn't valid earlier, but I have all the details right here. Could you please take a look?" The supervisor glanced at the screen, nodding slowly as he examined the information. "Let me check this for you," he said, stepping behind the counter to access the system. After typing in a few details, his eyebrows furrowed slightly. Everything seems to match up correctly. Your ticket is valid." Relief washed over Amara, but before she could respond, the supervisor continued. "However, I see that your original physical ticket was flagged as invalid. Can you tell me what happened when you first presented it?" Amara hesitated, unsure of how much to say. She didn't want to make things worse by pointing fingers, but she also knew she couldn't ignore what had occurred. Taking a deep breath, she explained. "When I handed my ticket to the flight attendant earlier, she tore it up without checking it properly. She just said it wasn't valid and moved on." The supervisor's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said sincerely. "That shouldn't have happened. Let me speak with her about this." Before Amara could protest or thank him, the supervisor motioned for Janet to join them. When Janet arrived, her demeanor was defensive, almost as if she already knew why she'd been called over. The supervisor wasted no time getting to the point. "Ms. Thompson here says her ticket was torn up without proper verification. Is that accurate?" Janet crossed her arms, avoiding eye contact with both Amara and the supervisor. "She handed me the ticket and I thought it looked suspicious," she replied curtly. "I acted according to protocol." The supervisor raised an eyebrow. "Protocol involves tearing up a passenger's ticket without confirming its validity?" "It wasn't valid," Janet insisted, her voice rising slightly. "Besides, she didn't seem like—" She stopped mid-sentence, realizing too late that she was about to say something she shouldn't. "Didn't seem like what?" the supervisor pressed, his tone sharper now. Janet faltered, glancing nervously between Amara and the supervisor. "Nothing," she muttered under her breath. "Look, I'll issue her a new boarding pass. No harm done." But Amara wasn't satisfied. She could feel the weight of Janet's unfinished sentence hanging in the air. It was clear that Janet's decision hadn't been based on logic or procedure. It had been driven by something else, entirely. Something unspoken but deeply hurtful. The supervisor seemed to sense this as well. After issuing Amara a new boarding pass, he assured her that the matter would be escalated to higher management for further review. "We apologize for the inconvenience," he said earnestly. "This isn't the level of service we strive to provide, and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again." Amara nodded, grateful for his effort to rectify the situation, but the damage had already been done. As she walked away from the gate, clutching her new boarding pass, she couldn't shake the feeling that Janet's behavior had been motivated by more than just a misunderstanding. It wasn't just about the ticket. It was about how Amara looked, how young she was, and perhaps even the color of her skin. Later that evening, Evelyn sat in her home office, staring at her laptop screen as she listened intently to Amara recount the events of the day. By the time Amara finished, Evelyn's jaw was clenched tightly, her hands gripping the edge of her desk. Though she remained outwardly composed, her mind was racing with anger and frustration, not just for her daughter's sake, but for the countless others who had likely faced similar treatment. Evelyn had worked tirelessly to build Skylink Airlines from the ground up. Starting with nothing but a dream and a fierce determination, she had transformed it into one of the most respected, names in aviation. But along the way, she had encountered countless obstacles, many of which stemmed from biases against her race and gender. She had fought tooth and nail to prove herself in an industry dominated by men, often facing skepticism and outright discrimination. And now hearing that her own daughter had been subjected to such blatant disrespect by one of her employees felt like a slap in the face. "This isn't just about you, sweetheart," Evelyn said gently, placing a reassuring hand on Amara's shoulder. "It's about every person who has ever been treated unfairly because of their appearance, their age, or where they come from. We can't let this slide." With that, Evelyn sprang into action. First, she called her legal team, instructing them to investigate the incident thoroughly. She wanted answers. Why had Janet torn up Amara's ticket? Was there a pattern of discriminatory behavior? And most importantly, what steps needed to be taken to ensure this never happened again? Next, Evelyn reached out directly to the head of customer service at Skylink, demanding an explanation. "I need to know exactly what went wrong today," she said firmly during the call, "and I expect immediate accountability." Word of the incident spread quickly through the airline's corporate offices. Employees whispered nervously about the fallout, knowing full well that crossing Evelyn Thompson was not something anyone wanted to do. For years, Evelyn had earned a reputation as a fair but formidable leader, someone who valued integrity above all else. If she was involved, it meant serious consequences were imminent. Meanwhile, Amara struggled to process her emotions. Part of her felt relieved that her mother was handling the situation, but another part of her couldn't help but wonder why she had to rely on her family's influence to be treated fairly. Would Janet have acted differently if she had known who Amara really was? And if so, did that mean respect and dignity were privileges reserved only for those with power and status? These questions weighed heavily on Amara's mind as she packed her bags for London. She tried to focus on the excitement of seeing her grandmother, but the memory of Janet's dismissive glare kept creeping back into her thoughts. For the first time, she found herself questioning whether blending in was truly worth it. Sure, it allowed her to avoid drawing attention to herself, but at what cost? If staying silent meant tolerating prejudice, then maybe it was time to start speaking up. By the end of the night, Evelyn had resolved to turn this unfortunate incident into an opportunity for change. She knew that addressing individual cases of discrimination was important, but it wasn't enough. Real progress required systemic reforms, changes that would hold everyone accountable, from frontline staff to senior management. With that goal in mind, Evelyn drafted a plan to overhaul Skylink's training programs, implement stricter anti-discrimination policies, and create a safe space for passengers and employees alike to report bias without fear of retaliation. As she reviewed the draft one final time before sending it off to her executive team, Evelyn couldn't help but smile. Despite the challenges ahead, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about fixing a mistake, it was about building a better future. And with Amara by her side, ready to learn and grow from the experience, Evelyn knew they could accomplish anything together.